Call the meeting to order. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call. All council members are present. Approval of the agenda. We have one change. We will be not doing the police department 2014 annual report as Brian is gone. We will do that at the next meeting. Is there any other changes to the, okay. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion from Heidi, second from Dave to approve the agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5 in favor, none against. Approval of the minutes of the February 4th, 2015 regular meeting. Is there any corrections or changes? There was one discrepancy at the top of page 5. I've talked to staff and that has been corrected, so I don't know if anyone else had anything else that they seen. Hearing no changes, do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the February 4th, 2015 regular meeting?
Motion to approve.
Motion from Dave,
I'll second.
and a second from Diane. Discussion?
Just wondering if you could point out what the change was.
Right at the top of page 5, basically it went from a temporary easement thing about Beltline, and we never really talked about Beltline.
Okay.
And it got in there somehow. And then we went right into an action thing for the airport grant adjustment, so that was all taken care of. Bottom of page 4, top of page 5.
Okay.
So,
Yep.
okay, we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5 in favor, none against. Now's our time for our public open forum. Is there anyone here that would like to speak to the council about anything that's on the agenda or they have on their minds? Is there anyone here that would like to speak to the council? You want to approach the podium and state your name and address? Right over here.
Good evening. For anybody who doesn't know me, my name is Dennis Fletcher. I'm here tonight to talk a little bit about the curly pondweed and the proposals that are going to come forward here tonight in regards to spraying the weeds. I was at the meeting the other night, as a lot of you are here know, and I spoke a little bit about it then. But for those of you who weren't, there's a number of reasons on it. I won't get into a lot of specifics tonight, but I think the fact that there's a plan in place for if the curly pondweed gets carried away, I think it's good that we have that. Having said that, at this juncture, I think that spraying the weeds would be a bad idea. I just talked to Tim a little bit, and he showed me one of the proposals that they have for doing a limited spray on just a few acres on both ends of the lake. And you find out when you get to be 64 or 65 years old that you don't always get your way. And what they're proposing is a limited amount of spraying, which probably won't affect. My biggest concern is the native weeds that are in Sauk Lake, but apparently they think they can address the curly pondweeds without affecting the native plants. I've done a lot of pond management on 60 ponds in my life in the bait business, and you're really, really touching a fine line here, folks. I don't care what the guy said the other day. We've done it. I have a license to do that also, and a lot of times that backfires. You try to do one without doing the other, and you wipe out the entire ecosystem. And the reason it hasn't got anything to do, the way I feel hasn't got anything to do with me being in the bait business, having a bait shop in this town. Sauk Lake at one time, some of you know this, some of you don't. At one time, Sauk Lake was the best sunfish lake in the entire state of Minnesota, bar none. We lost our weeds, and I think the primary reason we lost our weeds is because of the carp, which we can't do a lot about. But we do have after 8 or 10 years, we've got some native plants coming back, and that could be the beginning of something good happening, to where if we can get our native plants back to some degree without having any adverse effect to the rest of the recreational things that are going on in the lake, we could maybe get some of the sunfish population back. I don't think it'll ever be as good as it once was with carp in the lake, but if we could get it back to half of what it was, that I think would be a financially to this town. You know, we're always talking about economic development. We've got one right out here in Sauk Lake that could be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars to the city. So if we're going to go forward with this, my recommendation is tread lightly with the spraying until we see what happens. But I think with the carp in the lake, I don't think we're ever going to have enough weeds in this lake to where we're going to have to worry about it. It could happen if the carp population for some reason went down, but after 8 or 10 years, I don't see how that's ever going to happen. That's about all I have.
Okay. Thank you, Danny. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to the council? Is there anyone else that would like to speak to the council? Calling a third time. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to the council? Our public forum is now closed. We have no public hearings. We will move on to reports and presentations. As I stated before, the police department annual report has been postponed. So then I will move on to life-saving presentation. Kathy?
Good evening, Mayor and council members. We're here today to present life-saving awards to ambulance members for life-saving measures performed in the pre-hospital setting. If I could have my EMTs come forward, please. Quinn Swedenberg, Jamie Cole, and Jasmine Huntington are the 3 that were involved in this life-saving award. Thanks, guys. So I'll give a rundown of the events that happened that day. On December 19th, 2014, at approximately 11:50 hours, the Sauk Center ambulance crew, consisting of Quinn Swedenberg, Jamie Cole, and Jasmine Huntington, were at the hospital finishing up their paperwork from a previous call when their pagers went off again. This time they were paged to a residence in Sauk Center for a female with difficulty breathing. Within 1 minute, they were en route to the scene. When they arrived at the residence, they found Lois laying on her side on the couch. She had rapid respirations and was complaining about difficulty breathing and also of having chest pain. EMTs noted her nail beds were blue, which is an indication of poor oxygenation. They quickly loaded Lois onto the cot and took her out to the rig. While en route to the hospital, Jasmine was establishing an IV while Jamie was updating the hospital staff via the radio. While giving her report to the hospital, Jamie advised them that they were en route with a 62-year-old female. Lois corrected her and said she was 66. When Jamie finished her radio report to the hospital, she asked Lois to rate her pain level and did not receive an answer from Lois. She had gone unresponsive and did not respond to either voice or a sternum rub. The cardiac monitor was showing her heart rate at 248 beats per minute, which the normal rate for an adult is about 60 to 80. Her heart rhythm was showing to be in ventricular tachycardia, otherwise known as VTAC. Jasmine could not feel a pulse in the neck and started compressions, while Jamie applied the defibrillator pads and got the ambu bag to assist with breathing. By this time, they were turning off Sinclair Lewis Avenue onto Main Street. Quint quickly called the hospital to give them an update that their patient was a full code, meaning CPR in progress. Within a half a minute of compressions in the rig, Lois started breathing on her own again and had regained a pulse, a normal pulse. She did, however, remain unconscious, and as they pulled into the ambulance bay at the hospital, she quit breathing again. As Jamie and Jasmine were attempting to insert an oral airway, Lois once again started breathing on her own. In the emergency room, Lois regained consciousness and complained of difficulty breathing. After approximately 5-10 minutes, she went into respiratory and cardiac arrest again. Jasmine again started compressions while the hospital staff provided their care and medications, and within a minute, she had a pulse and was breathing on her own again. It was determined that Lois had pulmonary embolisms, and due to the seriousness, a helicopter was called. However, due to the weather conditions of dense fog, the helicopter was not able to fly, so the ambulance was used to transport Lois to the St. Cloud Hospital for specialty care. The ambulance crew, along with Dr. Lee and an RN, Mary Rasmussen, in the back for advanced life support specialty care, took Lois emergent to the St. Cloud Hospital without further incident. So we have Lois here tonight. If I could have Lois come up to present the life-saving pins to our EMTs. Thank you, Lois. So once again, Jasmine Huntington saved a life. Quint Swedenberg saved a life. And Jamie Cole saved a life. So we have another reason to be proud of our ambulance crew, another life-saving crew. Because of you, another beat goes on.
I just want to say, God bless each and every one of you, because if it wasn't for God, they would not have been there at that time, and I would not be standing here. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you to our crew, and thank you, council, for giving us this time. Thank you.
Thank you. And on behalf of the city, I want to show our appreciation to the ambulance crew for all the work they do, and congratulate Lois for staying with us.
All right, thank you.
With that, we'll move on to our action items. Approved boards and commissions appointment, Senior Center.
It would have been a good night to have the purchase of a new ambulance on the agenda.
You'd have to go through operations first, right, Dave?
Right.
They're closing it. Okay. Okay, so this is the board and commissions appointment. There's nominations for various boards, as you know we do every year, and we do have openings on the Senior Center Board. And Betty Keenan has requested to be appointed to that board, and because we can have up to 15 members, it's recommended that she be appointed, and this would be a term from January 1st, 2015 to December 31st, 2017.
Okay. Any questions, comments? If not, do I have a motion to appoint Betty Keenan to the Senior Center Board?
So moved.
We have a motion by Keith,
Second?
second by Heidi. Call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5 in favor, none against. Item B, approve Sauk Lake Curly Leaf Pond treatment proposal.
Okay. In 2014, you're aware that the City Council entered into an operational plan arrangement with the Sauk River Watershed and the Big Sauk Lake Association on how aquatic invasive weeds would be managed on Sauk Lake. This is an update from the former weed harvester program, and it would utilize the maintenance funds previously collected for the operation of the harvester to keep navigation channels open on the lake. The proposal is to treat the weeds with a chemical early in the season after the invasive plants are growing, but before the native vegetation has taken off. And I did put in your packet, why is curly leaf a problem that type of thing, and explain how it works and how it, what it does to the lake. The Big Sauk Lake Association submitted a treatment plan and budget to the watershed and the city in July of 2014. The plan was developed following an evaluation of the curly leaf pondweed by Lake Restoration, Inc., which is a firm hired by the association. The results of the evaluation found 93 acres of CLP existing on the lake, which would require a treatment budget of $28,000 if all of the acreage was sprayed. Now, the one thing about the plan, according to our operational plan with the watershed and the Big Sauk Lake Association, is we're supposed to have that to the watershed by the 31st. The plan got taken to the watershed by the 31st, but the city council reviewed it in August. That was our first meeting after we received it. The council did not approve or deny it. We took no action at that time. So, going back to the pondweed itself, a determination of how much, if any, of the weeds that will be treated in 2015 is yet to be made. The 93 acres identified includes navigation channels and shoreline property. So whether all or none of it, it depends, or all or some of it is a decision yet to be made. We had an informational meeting here at City Hall on Monday, February 23rd. We had input from Lake Restoration, Inc., the Watershed District, the Lake Association, DNR Fisheries, area fishermen, related businesses, the area campground, and lakeshore owners. So we had standing room only here for those of you that were here. We had a wide variety of viewpoints. You have the sport fishermen and related businesses prefer no spraying. Some residents' businesses prefer that the navigation channels be maintained. Some recreational users and others would like it all to be treated. So we have a wide variety. But it was agreed that we need to preserve and protect the native vegetation to increase habitat, but we also want to manage the CLP so it doesn't become a nuisance and rise to how it was in the early 2000s. So that's kind of what we're here to talk about tonight. So the City Council, they should discuss the pros and cons and make a recommendation on how much, if any, of the CLP should be treated in 2015, taking into consideration the budget, the public comments, eligible uses. An application for treatment of the entire 93 acres was submitted without the expectation that we do 93 acres, but upon receiving an application, they come out and actually measure and decide how much is considered a nuisance. And then they'll limit it to that'll be the cap that we could spray if we do it. And so moving forward, this action and approval would occur early each summer for the next fiscal year. But this is our first time through, and when we didn't have final determination last summer. So going forward next year, we'll be talking like 2016. We'll be moving into that early this year. I did put a copy of the identified sites in your packet with a map, and then tonight I got updated maps for you that I passed out, and the Lake Association met after we had our informational meeting, and they were proposing 2 areas of spray. One is about 9 acres near the Narrows, and just on the north side of the Narrows on one half, and then the other is about 6 acres up toward the very, very north end. And the reason for doing like the half by the Narrows is because then they can use that as a test to monitor that compared to what happens on the other half. So it's, and I believe Tim is still here if you have any questions for the Lake Association on that. I wanted to bring it to the council now as it's kind of as an update on what the city council will recommend to going forward. If you want to recommend you go with the Lake Association proposal, if you would like to recommend some changes to that or how you want to move forward. But we did task ourselves with working with the Lake Association and the watershed on managing the curly pondweed in Sauk Lake. So, does anybody have any questions for me or maybe for Tim or discussion amongst yourselves?
Any questions?
Yeah. This reduced area is whose recommendation?
The Lake Association.
And on what criteria?
On what criteria did they?
Yeah, I mean, why these are very limited areas. I mean, really limited areas. What is it about these areas that we think they should be sprayed?
What sets them apart from others? Tim, could you answer that?
Why these areas?
Yeah, I'm Tim Weir with the Lake Association. And Dave, we chose those areas for a couple of reasons. They're navigational, for one thing. One of them's right by the Narrows, another one's up by the north end.
Okay,
We also chose them.
A minute. I know that the Narrows, there's a boat landing there. Up at the north end, why is that a navigation? I mean, it looks like it doesn't go anywhere. Is that a,
Well, sir, it goes to a resort, for one thing.
okay, so there's a resort area there.
Yes. Yep. And the other reason we chose those is because those of us on the Lake Association have identified those two areas also as having curly leaf pondweed. For example, Rick Jennison lives right next to the one by the Narrows, and he says he clearly has seen curly leaf pondweed. The other sites were very much more sporadic, so these were the two sites that had a little bit more density to them. So we decided to choose those, two of those sites. One of the reasons is that we're only doing half of that, or we're recommending only half of it by the Narrows, is because we want to use this as a test plot, sort of. So we can, if we were to spray that area, we can watch it throughout the year and compare it to the other side of the Narrows that we didn't spray. And very similar on the north end, we've got over by Diamond Point along that shore, you can see where there's some growth there. So we want to do this, because they're both areas where boat travel is pretty frequent, and we know there's curly leaf pondweed there, and we thought we'd give it a try as a test plot.
All right.
I have a question. I wasn't able to attend the meeting last Monday, but just kind of doing my own research online, both from our DNR and from other states who've experienced this. This plan has been around since 1910. I mean, it's been around forever. But in the early 2000s, Wisconsin and I believe Minnesota treated two lakes with this aquifer. And it's not a one-time deal. They had to treat it annually. The report went on for 3 years. But if we treat it once, what's the plan moving forward?
Well, that's a good question, because curly leaf pondweed has the turions, the little seeds on it, and they can actually stay in the ground for up to 7 years and continue to sprout. So if you went at this 1 year and then just thought you would get rid of them, you probably won't. Nobody wants it to return to what it was back in the early 2000s. So do you want to be proactive in this and try to catch it before it starts spreading too much? Because it will spread. Whether or not it comes back like it was like in the early 2000s, I don't know. But we're looking at being a little proactive at this so that it doesn't spread. Now, it's not a one-time fix.
Proactive for what?
Proactive.
I mean, the literature is pretty clear that this is not going to control it. It's just going to eliminate it on a yearly basis in certain areas.
It will control it.
In the areas that are treated, it will be taken out, but it dies off anyway.
Yeah, it dies off, but along with the die-off, the seeds go down. So the spray happens, two things about the spray. There's good weeds and bad weeds, we recognize that. Denny talked about native weeds. We like weeds. Weeds are good for the fisheries, weeds are good for water clarity, it sucks up a lot of phosphorus that's in the water. Curly leaf pondweed is not a good weed. Eurasian milfoil is not a good weed.
I've heard Eurasian milfoil makes a really dense mat. Curly leaf pondweed seems to be a little more gray that way.
Curly leaf pondweed grows at this time of year.
Mm-hmm.
Come late May, it reaches the top of the water, maybe early June. It sits there for about a month and then it dies. And when it dies, it drops down to the bottom, covers all of the all of the native weeds and prevents them from growing. And as it decays, it gives off phosphorus and causes the algae blooms. Native weeds, however, begin growing in May, and they grow all season long. So there's a real advantage to having native weeds. They're going to be there all the time. They're going to provide habitat for the fish. Whereas the curly-leaf pondweed is a weed that comes up in June and dies off first part of July, and you never see it again.
Was the treatment done back in the early 2000s, was that, and that was done to Sauk Lake as well, right?
The Lake Association in 2007 treated a strip of land on the south end in the South Bay. It was a narrow strip, and it was parallel to the shore. I think it was 100 or 100 feet wide, 150 feet wide, and I think we went out 1,000 feet, if I remember correctly. We just wanted to see the effect, how effective this chemical was for.
Was that
curly
targeted
leaf.
at curly leaf, or was that targeted?
It was targeted at curly leaf.
Okay.
Yep. And frankly, Vern Beckerman and I were the ones who were told to go out there and kind of watch this and see how it performed. And we were totally disappointed with it at that point. We didn't really see any difference between the area that was treated and the area that was not treated.
But I think it's been kind of the general feeling of people who've been on the lake in the last few years that all the weeds are gone.
Yeah, well, they are, but there is curly leaf pondweed. There is some. Thank God it's not like what it used to be. And hopefully it'll never come back to that level again.
I've heard a lot of talk about the curly leaf takes out, will choke out the native, the good weeds that are in the lake. Is the longevity of what's going to ensure that the good weeds are going to come back once the bad weed is gone? Is there any planting that's planned for this? Is there a drawdown or a dredging that's planned for this lake, or because the dredging is what it needs, right?
Yeah. Well, the dredging and drawdown are not in any plans that I know of.
So then the good weeds won't come back.
No. So the native weeds are, according to the DNR, Eric Altena, they're coming back.
Okay.
To what degree, we wish they would be back better than they are now. But one of the things that you asked the question of, how can we ensure we get the curly leaf pondweed with the spray and rather than the natives? There's two things that they do to try to ensure that they just target the curly leaf pondweed. One thing is they reduce the concentration to approximately half of what the native weeds are affected by this aquathol. And the second thing they do is they attack this at 40 to 50 degree water temperature. If the water temperature all of a sudden goes up to 52 degrees, the DNR won't let them spray. Okay. So they target the time period and the level of aquathol so that when they apply it, the curly leaf pondweed is growing because it's a cold water weed. It's growing right now. And the natives are not. So they target the time and they target the amount and they try to get just the curly leaf pondweed.
Okay. I'm just kind of curious because, you know, I do some gardening, and in the fall I always sow my garden with clover because it chokes out. It's an annual grass and it dies back in the spring. But it chokes out the bad weeds. Is there any, you know, do they ever think about seeding in good weeds to choke out that bad? Is that that seems a little more safer for the ecosystem than poisoning it? Yeah,
do you remember when the DNR tried to plant some bulrushes out on the lower end right off of the access there? They did that 2 different times. They tried to plant bulrush. Bulrush is a great native weed. It eats a lot of phosphorus in the water, which you don't want phosphorus because that leads to the algae blooms and all that. So they tried that twice and it didn't work for whatever reason, whether it was because we have such fluctuations.
Because of water fluctuations.
Yeah, I don't know.
Sure.
I don't know why, but it didn't work. And I've never heard of anybody sowing seeds for native aquatic plants. So I think you just let nature take its course in that.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? I've got one. The proposal that was brought up to us on the 31st of July, and it was taken to the watershed district. Is that the one that they're considering, or are they waiting for an agreement between the Sauk Lake Association and the council to come back for that meeting they have on the 17th? Or are they strictly going to just look at the one that's already laid out in front of them?
Are you talking about the budgeted
Yep.
plan? Oh, no. The watershed district is, the DNR and the watershed district, nobody's gonna do anything unless we come to an agreement, the city and the Lake Association, on the amount of spray that we want conducted.
Okay.
The budget was simply a budget, and you guys are familiar with budgets. You don't necessarily have to spend your budget. But we had to put something in front of the watershed district as part of the agreement that gave us the authority to do anything in case we wanted to. So we had vegetative management conduct a survey. They came up with these acreages, 92 acres of dense enough weeds that could be sprayed. So we just took it and applied that. We knew we would not be spending all that kind of money, but it was something that we could throw in front of the watershed district and have a basis for it.
Okay. So in other words, if the city and the Lake Association don't come to an agreement, nothing will happen, basically? Because
Well,
you got the budget proposal, and now you come with this proposal, and if we decide not to do anything, and the watershed sees a disagreement, where's that gonna leave it?
Well, I certainly hope we signed this contract, the Lake Association and the city, under the understanding that we could come to an agreement on these things.
Okay,
We assumed that.
all right. Any other comments?
I'm all for coming to an agreement, but I know that the contract we signed said we were supposed to see a plan by July. It's March, and now we're seeing a plan. That bothers me a little, more than a little. And also the fact that, well, you pick two areas, one which seems to benefit a single entity, and one based on, Rick Jennison said it seems denser there.
No, he's not the only one, but has very much experience with it because he lives right there.
Okay, well, he's the name you gave. I mean, we had a survey that said there's 93 acres of pondweed, and you have 15 acres identified here.
Yep.
And I question why. I question the benefit of those limited areas unless you're talking about a test brain, but you said you did one, but you said it didn't seem to make any difference.
Yep.
So I question why we'd be doing another one then. I mean, it seems, I'll tell you what I've come from. For 15, 20 years, it seems like Sauk Lake's been like a little high school science experiment. Well, let's try cutting the weeds. Well, let's try this. Well, let's try that. Well, let's do a drawdown. Let's see what happens. And it seems like we just take a shot in the dark. You know, the weeds exploded. We don't know why. The weeds are gone. We don't know why. Well, let's try something else. And nobody seems to have real handle on what it'll do. The DNR's done studies. It's not going to take care of pondweed. They say right off the bat, this is not about taking care of pondweed except clearing areas for the season. So every year and next year it'll be back. Nothing's being done about a long-term solution. Navigation channels, there might be some justification for that, but these, other than, you know, the one where we have a public landing, I could see that might be a navigation channel. The other one, it's a resort, and the resort uses it. But the resort probably could spray this themselves. They could get a permit and do it for themselves. I don't understand why the rest of us are doing it. I'm a little fuzzy on that part of it.
Okay. Okay, the first thing you mentioned was the plan that we're supposed to submit to the watershed district. I believe it's a budget that we're...
A plan is what was supposed to be submitted.
Because you really can't determine what you're going to do the next year until you've had time to evaluate the results of the survey, and you've gotten the DNR involved. Because even though we've decided that the Lake Association has recommended this, and let's say we came to an agreement on this, there's still one more step in this process, and that's the DNR. The DNR has to go out there to these two specific sites, and they have to determine whether or not they feel that there's enough curly leaf pondweed to spray that. So that's another step in this process that we have neglected to mention. But they can put the kibosh to this, for example, too.
Well, are we talking about spraying in 2016 then?
We're talking about, this spray would be 2015.
So the DNR will come out,
Right away in early May, they will be out to those two sites if we submit these to them.
all right, so a spot check on almost a one-day kind of a window. Temperature and time has to be there, the weeds have to be there, and you have to turn around and spray them within that same window, basically.
Exactly. It's usually about a 3-week window. The DNR's got to get out there right away. Yeah, this is...
Color me
And you
skeptical.
can miss it. You can miss that.
All right.
Okay, and basically with the discussions, it isn't a beat-up session on the Lake Association, because we are partners in this, but I do, I just got a few comments I want to make. I think the city has to have more involvement with that budget thing, and even with the planning. 40% of the funds came from the city.
Yeah.
That's the reason why we chose to be part of this contract. That, in 2007, there was a test strip done, but there was also algae treatment done at the same time. Nobody knows whether or not that's why there isn't any weeds. If it was anything the test strip did, or if it was something the DNR did that did an overkill, we have no idea. It's, one of the things that really bothers me is the study was done by the same company that's going to do the spraying. Mm-hmm. To me, it's a conflict of interest on their part. They mentioned that night that they did rake pulls. Well, I've talked to a few people and they've asked me, well, how far did they pull the rake? Did they drop it over the edge of the boat and catch a bunch of weeds, or did they pull it 10 feet, or did they pull it 100 yards to finally get enough weeds on the rake to justify saying, yeah, we need to spray it? Nobody knows that question either, or that answer to solve that problem. I think what we need to do between the association and us is get a better handle on how we're going to do things. And as of right now, until we get more answers on what we're doing, I'm really seriously leaning personally that the only money we spend is on an independent study on what's actually out there. I do recognize the fact that Sauk Resort is, that bay out by them is choked with weeds, but it's only a short distance of curlyleaf. The rest of it's all coontail, which is native, and we can't touch it anyway, so it's not going to help their channel as far as access. As of right now, I don't think there's anything that I need more to say. I don't know if the council's got some other ideas. I plan on going to the watershed meeting on the 17th. If they need any input, so I'm going to ask the council what their wishes are, or if they got any questions or discussion they want to go with.
Just thinking about this over the last week, the two problems I have with the treatment in general is that Sauk Lake isn't really a Sauk, or isn't really a lake, it's a reservoir, it's a river, it's moving water. How do we target such a specific location guaranteeing it's not going to flow downstream?
Okay, that's a good question, and they say they can do it.
But is that what happened in 2007, and that's why we have no...
No, I don't, where we did the test plot, it had nothing to do with moving water, because when the water comes into the lake at the very north end, and then it gets into the main body of water, the movement is so slow. This stuff has a very short half-life. It comes down, it sinks down, so it's heavier than the water. Mm-hmm. So it immediately goes down to the point where it needs to attack that weed. And it doesn't just travel all over the place. Sauk Lake, where is not a very fast-moving body of water. It's not a river. These folks have done this before. Eric Altena even confirmed that was, they know how to do this. So personally, I don't know how they do it, but they say they can get it to go down fast, and they can control it.
One of the other things that I just thought of is, I mentioned Sauk Bay being, we can't really help them a lot, even though we do if we did do a test spot there, it's full of native. But even by the Narrows, this stuff basically raises up and is gone by the middle of June, end of June, so you're looking from fishing opener until it drops down a month where maybe boat traffic isn't going to get through it if it's really thick. And basically, last summer, the few times that I was out, it was not there that I noticed to the point that it was going to hurt anything. Just another comment I had to put out there.
And I would like to respond to your comment about getting together with the Lake Association.
Yep.
This year was not a good year. I mean, Dave, you'll remember, and Warren, you'll remember, this contract was coming to, we weren't even finished signing the contract and the budget was already due. And so everything was a little bit in turmoil this year, and I hope we can get together and come up with a better process for this, so we can do a survey and then sit down together and come up with an understanding of where we move.
And that's one of the things that I know can be done. It's just the pure fact that right now, that pushes me more to the not do anything for this year until we get a handle on how we go about doing things.
Yep.
And also show the watershed that we're responsible, because right now, you've given us the minor plan, which we just seen tonight for the first time, and the 17th, we gotta walk into it with. So it's kind of like, are we showing the watershed that we're actually working together? And I gotta, right now, I'm not certain that it's looks that way to them. Not that we can't. I just think 1 year of organization between the two groups would be a lot better. It's one, and I've heard enough people say they don't think we have a weed problem. And I don't know if 1 year is going to all of a sudden make Sauk Lake in 2016 one big weed mass like it was back in the early 2000s. So I guess I've said my piece enough. I don't know if anyone else has got something else.
I guess what bothers me is you've got the same people examining it to see if it needs to be sprayed, and they're doing the spraying. I find that a conflict of interest as well. I can't go along with that.
Well, it doesn't have to be that way. I mean, they did the survey. They came up with this recommendation. We could go out and hire anybody else. We interviewed 3 or 4 different, so it isn't necessarily the case. In fact, I believe the DNR doesn't like that idea too. So it doesn't have to be lake restoration. It could be Prairie Lake Management up in Brainerd. It could be another one that's out west. Yeah, you put those out for bids. That's a valid point, though.
One other question, Tim. Do you know when the last time the DNR did a weed survey in Sauk Lake? I know they do them every now and then, but I was just wondering when the last time they did one, so we could look at that.
I think it was about, I'm going to say 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay.
They did one.
Because that's something else that we haven't seen, to go along with what studies that your group has brought in. So, is there any other discussion?
Just one more question. Okay, it kind of sounds like there'll probably be no treatment in 2015. And in April, the biggest bloom ever of curly leaf pondweed shows up again. Are we going to have a weed harvester to?
No, I think that's a done deal.
That's done.
But I think by that time, nobody's going to respond to anything. He was talking about the DNR being out here in May, so if it's blooming already, well, we missed our window, didn't we?
I can't imagine 93 acres of curly leaf turning into 22 acres, or 2,200 acres.
No, we'd
can't
welcome
imagine
it
it.
on the lower end, but just in the event, yeah.
Okay. Any other discussion or comments? Otherwise, we got some recommendations here in front of us. Thank you, Tim.
Can I just
Go ahead.
just add a couple things? You know, I know you commented about getting the city more involved in the development of the plan. And when the plan was getting developed, the city said, we will look more to be stewards of the dollars. The Lake Association is kind of the expert on the plan. So the city wasn't really as involved in the development of the plan. So I just want to make sure the city council wants to be involved in the development of the plan, that we follow through with that and we work with them on it and not, have a repeat, so to speak. So that was the one part of it. And then the meeting of the watershed on this night, on the 17th, is simply that they can amend the use of the dollars from mechanical to chemical treatment. It's not specifically this particular application for this year. It's use of the dollars as a whole, a public hearing. So it's only part of it what we're going to do this year. But I'm sure they'll appreciate hearing what the city's recommendation is one way or the other. So.
Okay. Any comments or discussion with that?
So we don't have if we approved this limited use, we don't really have a watershed schedule of when they're looking at it? It's not on the agenda for the 17th?
The watershed's not doing it.
Right.
The watershed, the Lake Association or the city would be the applicant. The watershed, all they do is they look at it and they say, yep, that meets what the dollars could be used for, and they either pay the bill or
Okay.
not,
And they're doing that not on the 17th, presumably, since they're only considering changing the rules.
The 17th is when they are making sure that the use of the dollars can be used for chemical.
Right.
Correct.
So at some other time, or do we
You
go
know,
out and get it done and then ask them for the money and they may or may not pay it?
Well,
I'm just,
typically, we would send it in into July of the previous thing. They say, yep, this meets the requirements, and they're good with it. I mean, they've already reviewed the 93-acre parcel, the plan originally, and so they were ready to move forward. They're not going to approve or deny our application. All they're going to say is yes or no. It meets the intent of why we have collected the money, which was to control invasive weeds.
I'm wondering when that yes or no is supposed to happen.
Whether or not, so whether or not they look at it and say, yes, it meets it, or no, it doesn't.
Right.
It could be the 17th if we come up with an agreement, or it could be any time, whenever we have a plan in front of them.
Okay. Anytime, but I guess I don't know. We only meet twice a month. I don't know what they meet, and presumably it would
once a
be a
month.
meeting once a month.
They meet once a month.
So it'd be April,
It could be,
mid-April, okay. Getting tight, all right.
Yeah, it's tight.
yeah. I don't know what day they'll have it on their agenda.
All right.
Or whether it will even be an agenda item, or if they just look at it and it meets it, and staff-wise, they approve it.
Any other discussion? Comments? You got 3 recommendations in front of you. No treatment in 2015. Recommendation, treatment of navigation channels totally approximately, what the totals were that they gave us tonight.
It was about 15.
About 15, just over 15.
acres. Or recommend treatment of all 93 acres.
I'd like to make a motion that we move to not treat in 2015.
Okay, we have a motion not to treat. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a second by Diane. Any other discussion or comments?
Only the comment that I think we need to make, to move forward, though. I mean, we have now a recommendation. We should look into that and consider that in 2016. That might be what we do.
I also think at the same time, if this is what's our recommendation, that we coordinate a date where 1 or 2 of us can meet with the Big Sauk Lake Association and start the wheels turning on getting things working together.
I think it'd be a good idea to also get the DNR, that weed survey, you had mentioned.
Right, so. Okay, any other discussion or comments? Okay, we have a motion and a second for no treatment in 2015. Call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5 in favor, none against.
Can we have a momentary discussion on moving forward now? We're talking about a couple of people. We want to look at a committee, we want to consider in the future what we want to do with that.
What's the council's wishes as far as who they would like to see? Is that something that you would?
I mean, I'm thinking
I think the Sauk Lake
Operations
Association.
Committee is not out of line for it.
Right,
Otherwise, a different standing committee can be assigned to it.
right. Or do you just want, based on skills, just
Yeah.
have one person at least attend, or do you want, would you like to
Well,
have
I think
two?
we might want to have two, yeah.
Okay,
It doesn't have to be picked tonight. I think I'd just like to know, are we going to, because we can think about it. We obviously don't have to make that choice right now.
it also would depend on when Sauk Lake Association has their meetings. I'm not certain when their board meets.
Yeah, well, and it
Yeah.
might not be a board meeting that we're trying to do this at. That might be
Right.
cumbersome, so.
True.
I think it's a great idea.
Operations?
Well, I mean, the two of us beyond that. then.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can just pick that at a later date.
And I think we
once
can discuss that later unless
Sure.
somebody feels strongly right now.
Okay.
All right,
Great idea.
Okay,
let's maybe just put it on the agenda somewhere down the road here, not too distantly.
not too distant, right. Okay. Any other comments? Okay. Approve the easement purchase for Beltline project.
Okay, as part of the Beltline reconstruction project with the county, the city has been offered payment for an easement along the south side of Beltline, adjacent to the info center. The request is for a temporary easement immediately adjacent to the southerly 50-foot right-of-way of County State Highway 72. It's necessary to match into the existing topography during construction. The offer also includes payment for the removal of some trees necessary for the construction. I did give you a copy of the request. The total proposed payment is $32.53. However, because we're a cooperative partner in the project, we want to consider waiver of the payment as a way to reduce the overall project cost. So we've got so they're requesting a granting of the easement, and there was a suggestion maybe that we might want to consider waiving the payment. So,
Just have them subtracted off our bill.
well, whether we do the overall, if we reduce the overall project cost or they subtract it off ours, either way. We can waive it completely and just say, no, just save the money.
Okay. What's the council's wishes? Any comments or?
Just to clarify, I guess, so we could take the money, or we could waive it, and we would end up lowering the cost, and that would save us some portion of the money.
Correct.
We are paying, I imagine, less than half.
Correct. So if we waived it, it would really be saving the county more money than we
Right,
would gain
yeah.
if we accepted it. It's more of a partnership decision.
This has no bearing on whether there would be an approach onto that property off the
No.
Beltline? Okay.
I'm personally thinking that they were planning on spending the money, they can just take it off our bill,
Yeah.
at the end, rather than not,
Well, I'm thinking, yeah, you take the money and we'll get a bill for, I don't know, a third of it or whatever the city's portion is, basically, and,
Right.
well, we'll pay it, we'll have the difference.
but just save the paper,
Yep.
so. So with that, do we have a motion to approve the granting of slope easement to Stearns County and part,
Would that be the way to make a motion that we just talked about here? I guess?
We're willing to sell the
With the
easement, how's
waiver.
that?
well, if we approve the granting of the slope easement, it would be based on that
Without
agreement
waiving the cost.
that they got, but then we would just consider waiving, tell them that we, waive the payment and have it reduce.
Okay, then I will make a motion, we approve the granting of the slope easement.
All right, I will second that.
Okay,
But we are not waiving it at this time. We are merely approving the, all right.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Does everybody understand the motion? Okay. Any other discussion?
Maybe it wouldn't hurt to clarify just for,
Okay. We have a motion to approve the granting of the slope easement to Stearns County based on the agreement we got. At this point in time, we won't be waiving.
Right, for the sum
payment.
of, yeah.
We will not be waiving payment. So, call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5 in favor, none against. Okay, receive petition for annexation, Manette Road.
We have a petition for annexation of property on Manette Road. It's at the westerly boundary of the city. The property is 1.1 acre in size and is requested to be annexed for the purpose of access to municipal water and sewer. The action that we're requesting tonight is simply to accept the petition. It'll be on an agenda at a future meeting.
One question that I've got is, normally when we do annexations, don't we go kind of like by quarter section lines or section lines, not just by individual lots?
It can be done either way.
It can.
I mean, a lot of times in the past, we've had annexations of a larger parcel because they're going to develop it into multiple parcels. This is an individual property owner that lives on the boundary of the city and wants city services. And the only way we can grant city water and city sewer is if they're in the city. So that's why this one's a little different.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Otherwise, I'll be looking for a motion to accept the petition for annexation.
So moved.
A motion by Heidi,
And second.
second by Dave. Well, this basically just accepts the petition. It does not
Correct.
open us up to anything there, so. Without any other discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5 in favor, none against. Approved phone reimbursement policy.
This is for a cell phone reimbursement policy proposal. As you know, over the years, as cell phones became more prominent, the city discussed the city's policy as it relates to providing cell phones to employees. Currently, supervisors are provided phones for conducting city business. One option that we talked about in the past was, as a cost savings for the city and a benefit to the employee, is that the city just provided a stipend towards cell phone use of a private cell phone. And up until 2011, the IRS rules made it very complicated. It was taxable income, and you had to provide all kinds of paperwork, but they've since changed that law. So now businesses can just provide a flat stipend to employees as a reimbursement, and they don't have to track where the calls were made. They don't need to track any of those types of things. So now a lot of cities are looking toward going back to that policy rather than buying cell phones for all the employees, just reimbursing a portion. And part of that is because employees don't like to carry, they've got their cell phone and they've got their personal phone and they have all this other thing. The downside of doing it is if you use your personal phone for city business, then the whole phone becomes, you know, if there was ever, the city has access to your whole phone. If you were ever investigated or anything like that, everything on your private phone then becomes public. So there's a little not benefit to the employee to do it, but those that want to do it understand that. So now we have a request that the city, rather than providing a cell phone, that if we would just consider a reimbursement of that cost back. And so I said I would bring it back to the city council to see now with the IRS rules changing, if the city council would consider doing that, which would simply be a flat fee reimbursement to the employee for the use of the cell phone, for use of their personal phone for city business.
Okay, one of the questions was if there was any limitations, and you answered that.
Yeah. Right now, and also the cost right now of providing a cell phone to employees, it runs about $42 a month.
Okay. What kind of stipend is staff recommending if we would do this?
Well, whatever we would pay for a city to provide the phone, it would just be a flat fee to reimburse the employee that amount.
So you're talking $42 a month?
Like 42 or 40 or.
so it's going to cost us $42 either way.
It would cost a similar amount either way. Of course, we wouldn't be buying a phone or provide, that type of thing.
Okay. Is there some kind of contract or anything then we have signed with agreements to where they understand that if...
We would have to have an agreement to understand that that public use of the phone then makes it eligible to be viewed by the city for if there was ever an investigation, so they would have to understand that.
Okay.
So the reimbursement would be up to what it would cost us?
Or we could just set a flat amount.
Okay.
I mean, when I looked at this the first time, I thought, well, are you asking for this to go to the policy committee? Apparently not, but maybe it should.
Yeah.
If you want to take it to the policy committee, we certainly can do that.
I mean, I think that's up to
I think
us. I was a little,
Yeah.
it seemed like we need to look into this.
Actually, that's probably a very good idea to send it to the policy committee to look at, because I also think they should be the ones that look at the agreement as far as
Yeah, it's going to be a city policy.
And
So,
if there's a
makes sense.
contract or something like that and it needs to be signed between the employee, then the policy committee should actually be looking at it, so. Do I, general
General consent.
consent of
Policy.
everybody that this go to policy
Yep.
committee?
Yep.
Okay. Is that fine with you, Vicki? Paying no attention. Okay, transit garage rental.
With the availability of the old ambulance garage for Public Works, the Public Works has freed up 2 stalls up at the transit garage, and the transit bus system has requested the use of those stalls. We have 5 buses in Sauk Center, and they only have use of 3 stalls. So in conversation with them, they're very, very interested in providing some type of rent to the city in exchange for the use of those 2 stalls. But she emailed me today, and they haven't, their committee hasn't met for a final decision on how much they would be willing to pay. So we really don't have an agreement tonight that I was hoping to have a dollar amount in there for you. So we'll have that at a future meeting, but just kind of for your information, we'll be looking at that. Currently, the transit is up at they have 3 of the 6 stalls for their use free of charge, and that was part of the exchange for when the building was built in order to keep transit and bring transit to Sauk Center. So those 3 stalls that they have, they would continue to use free of charge. It's just the 3 stalls that the city has, we would rent 2 of them, on either a month-to-month or an annual basis. And if we ever need them back again, then we would deal with it at that time. So I don't know if anybody has any questions or comments I can take forward to them, but I will bring this back at a future meeting.
All right. Do we have any resolution on the situation with the lease agreement and responsibilities and all that kind of stuff?
Actually, I told her that at the council meeting tonight, after the meeting, I'd get together with the policy committee and set up a time the week of the 16th when they could come here and visit with you, so.
All right.
Any other questions, comments?
They staged 5 buses in town, huh?
Yes.
Wow.
Okay. We have no unfinished business. New business, termination of lease agreement, Chamber of Commerce.
We have received notice that the chamber is they gave us 60-day notice with its lease agreement at the information site that they will be relocating downtown. And the CVB board also voted to relocate with the chamber. And the lease did call for a 60-day notice, which that does satisfy that, because the 60-day notice, it would be till May 1st is when they would be vacating the premises. And so I was at the board meeting where the CVB board met too, and they voted unanimously to go with the chamber. And Ann had provided me, it's too late to get in the agenda, but she provided me some information about some of their reasonings. And one of them was to get people to come downtown instead of just stop at the fringe of town and then not come in. And so that was one of the reasons, and to be downtown where there's more activity and to get people to come this way. So. But the notice to you is simply notice. I don't know if you really need to accept it or anything. It's just informational.
And personally, I think it's a great idea that they are gonna be downtown. It's been one of them ideas that I've always thought, you know, the bulk of your businesses are downtown, and there's no need for them to be out on the outskirts, so I definitely like the idea, so.
Yeah, I
Be a
have no-
great gesture if they would continue paying rent for a year or so.
Yes, which leads us to the other question that we'll have to sort out down the road.
Right. I think that's one of them items that I think needs to go to a committee to start discussing what our future is with that. And I don't know which committee the council thinks that should go to, but
The future of what?
the future of the interpretive center.
Oh,
If it's
okay.
sitting empty, what our plans are.
Okay.
Yeah, there's now
Right now,
one entity in it.
The
then-
Sinclair Lewis
yeah.
Foundation's the only one in it.
And that is, an issue with the whole wayside
The-
rest type thing, and
That board also reached out to me, and we're going to be meeting again about the Sinclair Lewis Foundation and their board. So,
When are they planning to be in your new site?
May 1st?
May 1st. Okay. All right, any other comments?
did you want to try and get a committee on it? I mean, finance obviously has something to say about it.
Yeah.
I guess I don't know of any other committee that seems applicable, although finance is maybe not the most appropriate.
Yeah.
Operations, maybe. But,
I think for right now, I think we'll put it on an agenda item later on. And then in the meantime, each council member will have the chance to think about ideas and concerns and see what we do. We've got, see what our plans are for the future.
It's still for sale, you know. You didn't forget that, did you?
No, I didn't forget that.
Okay.
Okay, moving on. Consent agenda. We'll have our schedule of claims, unpaid claims of $169,604.08, paid claims of $559,779.29, for a total of $729,383.37. February checks, number 2,447E to 2,478E, number 36052 to 36095, and 3 payroll ACH transfers for a total of $7,743.40.
that's payroll, right?
We also have resolution number 2015-17, resolution accepting contribution from Community Connection for $500 for the Chamber Easter egg hunt, $1,000 from Community Connection for the ambulance, $1,000 from Community Connection for the Senior Center, $25 from Dave and Irma Bromanchenko for the ambulance, $50 from Dave and Mary Thomas for the splash pad, $50 from Amy Trisco for the splash pad. With that, we acknowledge those contributions and thank them for those. The police also have an excess vehicle and equipment to be offered for sale, a 2003 Cadillac Escalade. And that would be resolution 2015-18, declaring property as excess and authorizing sale. Is there any other questions?
The 2003 Cadillac Escalade, what about donating that to the police department? We own it free and clear. It was taken in I think a drug bust or something. Courtesy of your local drug dealer, donate it to the police department as an extra vehicle.
It's an option.
Be great advertisement for the police department.
It's actually, that would be a very reliable vehicle as well for, trips to, I know our police, do they usually take a squad when they go to court, or?
Yes.
No, they do, okay.
Well, they do, I shouldn't say that all the time. Sometimes they'll take their personal vehicle. It just depends on the availability.
Okay. Because, granted, it's an Escalade, but it still is a very sound vehicle too, and I think it,
Yeah, we looked at it when we did the operations up there, and
beautiful vehicle, and I think it would lend itself handily to city use. Just a thought.
Comments? Is that something that
We certainly
We should
could
take
not
off of the
declare it
consent?
excess for now, yeah.
take it off of the consent calendar for right now and have Brian pursue,
Unless they were counting on the money.
pursue that option? And if it's something that they aren't considering or don't think they'd be using, then we can have it on the agenda for the next meeting?
that's fine.
Because I
Sure.
think, if it's city business, we deserve a decent vehicle too.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar with the exception of the excess vehicle, the sale of that?
I'll make the motion.
We have a motion by Diane. Do we have a second?
Second?
Second by Heidi. Any other questions or comments? Call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5 in favor, none against. Informational items. You want to go through those, Vicki?
Sure. Just a reminder that the Board of Equalization is May 4th. It's coming up sooner than you think at 1 PM. That is on a Monday, and I do need a quorum of the city council present for that. And then these others are kind of a repeat. The hazardous waste collection, Wednesday, June 10th. Again, that is a new date. It's a Wednesday. It's a weekday versus Saturday that used to be at Becker's is now on a Wednesday at the arena. I do need a volunteer for that. And then our recycling day is May 15th and 16th at the arena parking lot. That is the metal recycling day. I did include in your packet the fire service calculations for the township contracts. That was from the meeting that was held on here on the 17th. And then the upcoming arena events again, which is the John Deere Show, March 17th to 18th, the Ivy Rose fundraising sale for March of Dimes, March 28th, the Gun Show, April 11th and 12th, the Craft Fair, April 18th, Ladies Night Out, April 23rd, Circus, April 25th. So, and then I don't have listed the multiple times we have it rented out privately for weddings and parties this year, so that's a good thing, so. There are no action items required.
So it is rented out for some weddings and parties?
Yes, it is.
Where is that, the Board of Equalization meeting being held?
It's here.
Okay.
Okay.
That's here.
Okay. And you need a quorum of us here for that?
Yes, for the Board of Equalization, we need to have a quorum, and one of us has to be
Certified.
certified for that.
Who's up this year?
Which is Dave and I.
You two, we are certified.
We're both certified, so one of the two of us has to be here for that. Any other questions, comments about the informational? Not, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
So I have a motion from Dave, do a second?
Second?
Second by Heidi. Call the question, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, 5 in favor, none against. Meeting adjourned.